Welcome back to Driftwood Stories, where the wind is soft and the stars remember. Here we drift not only through time, but through the hush before time ever began. Tonight we open a tale older than the gods, older than the stars, a tale wrapped in silence, breath, and the first shiver of becoming. In the vast nothingness before the world, there was only the gap, Ginnungagap, neither land nor sea, neither sky nor stone, but something deeper, a sacred stillness between fire and frost. This is the story of what came before all else, of how ice kissed flame, of how from mist and spark the first life emerged, silent, strange and mighty. So close your eyes now, if you wish, and let the night carry you northward to a time when there was no time, and a place where nothing had yet become. Let us begin with the void before time. Chapter 1. Silence in the Gap. Long before the mountains rose from the earth, before the sun carved its golden path across the sky, before even the ticking of time began, there was a silence, not the silence of sleep, nor the hush after a storm, but a silence without memory, without end, without shape. It stretched in all directions, not outward, not upward, but simply was, a stillness so complete it had no beginning, no breath, no border. This was Ginnungagap, the yawning gap, the sacred void between all that would one day become. There were no stars, there was no earth, there was no one to see or name what was not yet there. But even in that formless vastness, something was stirring. Not with motion, for motion had not yet found its name, but with presence, with potential, as if the void itself were holding its breath, waiting. To the north there was Niflheim, a realm not yet complete, yet already cold. Its winds were soft sighs, its rivers deep with ancient ice. Mist rolled endlessly, swirling through space with no land to settle on. Frozen streams spilled out from the spring called Ymir, and the frost that flowed from it whispered quietly into Ginnungagap, a breath of winter brushing the edge of forever. To the south there was Muspelheim, a land of fire, though no land yet held it. It burned bright, untamed and endless, its embers flickering across the unseen dark. This was no wild flame of anger. It was a clean, living fire, filled with heat and pulse and possibility. The air crackled with light that knew no sun, no fuel, no boundary, and between them, the gap, the sacred middle, neither cold nor hot, neither light nor shadow, but something stranger, the canvas of all things to come. There were no gods, no creatures, no names nor numbers, only elements waiting for the moment when contrast would give birth to form. And slowly, across the eons, the chill of Niflheim drifted southward, its breath gathering in faint crystal threads. From the opposite edge, Muspelheim's fire reached out, its warmth pulsing softly into the empty dark. At first they did not touch, but in time, or rather in the lull before time, the edges met, not with a roar, not with a clash, but with a quiet, hallowed sigh. The mist and the flame brushed against each other, one shivering, the other glowing, and from their union drops began to fall, only a few at first, gentle, slow, glowing with a shimmer of paradox, not ice, not flame, but something entirely new. They pooled in the unseen centre of Ginnungagap, glistening like starlight that had forgotten where to shine. And from these sacred drops, life began. The first shape to rise from that pooling was vast, strange, ancient and slow, a giant born not from parents, but from the mingling of contrasts. His name would be Ymir, though he did not yet know it. He did not wake with words, he did not see with eyes, he simply was. And with his being came breath, heavy, slow breath that echoed across the void, turning stillness into rhythm. From his body the frost continued to drip, new forms gathering from the essence of that first encounter. But Ymir was not alone for long, for from the salty rime of the ice, another form took shape. Audhumla, the great cosmic cow. Her body shimmered with gentle light. Her breath was warm, though she came from ice. She moved slowly, peacefully, as if she had always known how to exist in the middle of everything. Audhumla had no pasture, no meadow, no stable, only the vastness. But she licked the frost-covered stones of Ginnungagap, and from their salty surface she found sustenance. And from her milk Ymir fed, drinking deeply, slowly, the rhythm of the void now echoing between two beings. They were alone, yet not lonely. They had no language, but no need for words. They were the first breath of becoming, and the void that had been empty now held memory. Each lick of the cow's tongue across the icy stone revealed something new, and on the third day her tongue uncovered a shape in the ice, a face, a form. It was not like Ymir's. It was smoother, brighter, calmer. This was Búri, first of the gods. He came forth from the ice as if sculpted, his eyes ancient yet newly opened. With him came the spark of divine purpose, not chaos like Ymir's breath, but intention. But that is a tale for later. For now the void still holds its sacred hush. Ymir dreams, Audhumla feeds, and the fire and frost sleep beside each other. In the hush before all else, the gap no longer yawns with emptiness. It listens, it remembers, it watches, and from that long-held silence, the first stories are preparing their shape. Chapter 2. The First Breath of Frost. Ymir did not awaken as we would, for there was no morning yet to rise to. There was no sky to blink into, no soil beneath his limbs. He awoke slowly, not with thought, but with breath. His chest rose and fell in the silence, as if he were the gap itself learning to inhale. He was fast. His form neither man nor beast, but something ancient and immense, woven from the union of heat and cold. Where Ymir lay, the air shimmered, his body steamed softly in the void, melting the frost with his warmth, and then chilling the drops again with his breath. Each sigh he gave dripped life into the emptiness. He did not know he was first. He did not know he was alone, but still, From the slow movement of his sleep, new life began to stir. From the sweat of his skin, moisture gathered, and from that moisture, other forms began to grow, strange, heavy-limbed creatures, like echoes of his vastness. They were not shaped by choice. They emerged from dreaming. These were the first of the frost giants. The Jotnar, born not with fire, but with shadow and sleep in their bones. They crowded around him as infants to a mother, though he did not reach for them. They followed the sound of his breath, the rhythm of the first being, and from his dreams they took shape and stirred. Yet even as they were born of him, something restless lingered in their gaze, something untamed, something growing apart. In the stillness of Ginnungagap, Ymir was no longer alone, but the silence had changed. It was no longer the hush of waiting, but the murmur of beginnings, the friction of becoming. Elsewhere, the great cow Audhumla moved gently across the frost. She did not speak, but the sound of her slow breath was like the hum of an ancient lullaby. Her tongue traced the cold stone day after day, seeking not food, but memory. She seemed to know, in the quiet way that trees and rivers know, that something lay beneath the frost, something waiting to return. And on the first day, her licking revealed the faint edge of a figure, a curve of cheek, a glint of ice-buried brow. On the second day, a shoulder, a hand, closed eyelids beneath frozen light. And on the third, he emerged fully, Búri, first of the divine line, not born, but revealed, not created, but uncovered. He stepped from the stone in silence, not startled, not confused. He looked upon the yawning gap and saw not emptiness, but possibility. He was tall, tall as the roots of the world tree would one day grow. His hair shimmered with frost. His skin glowed faintly, as though carved from morning light beneath the ice. Audhumla watched him with calm, endless eyes. She did not need to teach him. He already understood. Ymir, too, felt this shift. The gap was no longer his alone. The air had changed, warmer in places, colder in others. He began to stir more deeply. His dreams thickened, his breath grew heavier, and the Jotnar multiplied, their numbers growing like the mist, twisting into strange forms, each carrying echoes of Ymir's shape, but none matching it. They began to wander, not far, for there was still no land, but inward toward thought, toward curiosity. Some whispered to one another, words not yet language. Some watched Búri with unease, sensing something unfamiliar in him, not just his form, but his stillness. For Ymir and his offspring were beings of dream and drift. They moved with the void's rhythm. But Búri, he stood with intent. He was the first to choose to be, the first to wait with purpose, and from him another soon came, a son, Búr, and Búr in time would take a wife, a strange and ancient figure, born perhaps from the mist, or from the memory of stars. Her name was Bestla, and from their union 3 sons would be born, Odin, Vili, and Vi. But that too waits in shadow, for now Ymir dreams, and in his dreaming his chaos grows. Where once he breathed quietly, now his breath rattles the silence. The Jotnar argue, shifting like storm clouds in the frost. Their numbers strain against the stillness, and Búri watches, not with fear, but with a deeper knowing that something must give. That creation cannot remain balanced forever. When born from such opposing forces, yet even now, Ginnungagap holds them all. The first frost, the living fire, the cow of nourishment, the giant of dreams, and the god of ice-buried light. The void has become a cradle, and the cradle rocks gently, touched by tension, laced with wonder. The breath of frost has begun, and soon the shaping of the world must follow. Chapter 3. Audhumla and the Stone. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her breath was gentle, her movement slow, and in the ancient hush of Ginnungagap, her presence was like the hum of a sacred river beneath ice. She was Audhumla, the first cow, the nourisher of worlds. Where she had come from no one knew. There had been no mother, no herd, no pasture carved from soil. She was not born. She was simply there, as though the gap itself had breathed her into being. When it realized life must be fed, her body glowed faintly in the dim of the void, neither cold nor warm, but balanced, her skin smooth like mist, her breath steady as starlight. Ymir fed from her without thought. He did not understand hunger, only need. He drank deeply, and his breath softened. His dreams grew longer. From her he drew life. And from him life spread like frost across still water. Audhumla, content, moved slowly across the icy edges of the gap. There was no grass beneath her hooves, no ground to press into, and yet she walked, sure-footed on the nothingness, as though it were meadow. And then she began to lick. It was a gentle motion, repetitive and calm. Her tongue passed over the same patch of frost, slowly, carefully, like a sculptor working stone. Why she licked, no one could say. Perhaps she sensed something buried beneath. Perhaps she remembered a time before time, when beings lay frozen in waiting. Or perhaps she simply followed instinct older than creation itself. The ice responded. On the first day, as her tongue worked its slow pattern, a faint shape began to show, not a crack, not a flaw, but a glimmer of form beneath the frost. It was the edge of a face, a brow smooth and ancient, half revealed beneath centuries of silence. She licked and licked, unhurried. On the second day, the shape grew clearer, cheekbones carved from quiet light, a nose kissed with shadow, eyes still closed but peaceful, as if the being beneath was not trapped, but resting. And on the third day, as frost gave way to warmth, he came forth entirely. Búri. He did not stumble, he did not cry out. He stepped from the stone as if answering a call only he could hear. His hair was long and silver-white, flowing behind him like river mist. His eyes, when they opened, held no fear, only understanding. He looked upon Ginnungagap and knew he had awoken into something sacred, something unfinished. Audhumla paused, watching him with quiet satisfaction. Her work, it seemed, was complete. For a time, Búri stood alone. No voice welcomed him. No wind carried his name. But in the heart of the void, he was no longer a stranger. He looked toward the distance, where fire still burned in Muspelheim, and ice still sighed from Niflheim, and he felt the pull of purpose. He was not born of chaos, like Ymir. He did not multiply in sleep, or exhale new forms by dreaming. He was singular, intentional. Where Ymir was vast and ever-expanding, Búri was formed and focused, not louder, not stronger, but stiller. And in that stillness, a different power stirred. Time passed, though it had no name yet, and from Búri came a son, Bor, tall and quiet, with eyes like the space between stars. Bor would go on to choose a mate, a woman named Bestla, whose origins were mist-wrapped and hidden, perhaps a daughter of the frost giants, perhaps a gift from the silence itself. From their union came 3 sons, Odin, Vili and Ve, but their tale too belongs to a later chapter. For now, the gap had grown crowded. Ymir still dreamed, but his dreams had thickened, no longer calm and drifting. They now stirred with disquiet. His children, the frost giants, had begun to wander. They looked not only to one another, but to Búri and his line with unease. Ymir's breath no longer soothed. It weighed heavy. The mist thickened around him. The void, once so vast and silent, now pulsed with many lives. Tension gathered in the space between. Audhumla watched, grazing the mist once more, her eyes like moons, calm and knowing. She sensed it before the rest. The coming shape, the quiet edge of a choice forming, the cow of the void, the mother of nourishment, the bringer of awakening. Her part in this tale was drawing to a close, but her touch remained, in the stillness, in the memory of frost, in every being nourished by her first milk. Creation had begun, not all at once, but like a gentle tide washing over sleep. And where before there was only waiting, there was now wonder, uncertainty, and the slow arrival of what might become conflict. But for this moment, in the lull between breaths, Búri stood tall, Ymir drifted in dreams, Audhumla grazed the unseen frost, and Ginnungagap, the great quiet gap, held them all, like a cradle preparing to rock. Chapter 4. The Quiet Tension. The gap no longer whispered with silence. It hummed now, softly but steadily, a quiet tension echoing in the space between what had been and what would come next. Where once there had been only stillness, now there was movement, not hurried or loud, but persistent, like roots inching beneath frost, like thoughts stirring beneath sleep. Ymir, first of all beings, still lay within the mists. His breath came heavier now, his dreams restless, and from his vast form more giants were born. They came not from womb or word, but from his skin, his sweat, his stirring, one from under his arm, twins from the folds of his legs. Strange shapes grown from shadow and substance, Their eyes opened to the gap not with awe, but with appetite. The Jotnar were many now, too many. They spread through Ginnungagap, not malicious, but aimless, driven by hunger, drifting without purpose. Some laughed, a low, distant rumble that echoed through the gap. Some fought, their limbs colliding like boulders tossed by wind. And some merely watched, eyes gleaming with questions, with craving. Ymir did not guide them. He did not govern. He only dreamed, and his dreams darkened. Thunderless storms brewed behind his eyelids. His limbs shifted in sleep, disrupting the gentle balance of the gap, what had once been the calm centre of all things, was beginning to tilt. In another part of the void, Búri stood still. His gaze remained fixed on the frost, on the edge where form met formlessness. He watched the children of Ymir grow bold. He watched their shadows lengthen. Beside him now stood his son, Búr, and Búr's quiet wife, Bestla. She too was of the Jotnar, but in her veins flowed something older, something colder, an echo of clarity amid the chaos. And from them came 3 sons. The first was Odin, whose eyes saw not only what was, but what could be. He listened to the silence between things, and heard the runes waiting to be named. Then came Vili, with a voice like wind over new snow, clear and questioning, and Vi, whose fingers traced patterns in the mist, as if sketching worlds that did not yet exist. They were young, but they carried with them something the others did not. Purpose, not the wandering hunger of the giants, not the instinctual nurturing of Audhumla, but the will to shape. They watched as Ymir's children grew bolder. Some approached the divine family, curious, mocking, drawn by the strange calm that clung to Búri's line. There were no battles, not yet, but there were stares that held weight, movements that stirred wind. The gap was growing crowded, its breath uneven, and Búri, old and pale as moonstone, knew a choice would soon need making. Ymir, meanwhile, shifted again. His dreams flared into visions, twisting landscapes, echoes of fire and water, teeth and ice and bone. The giants born of him multiplied, but with them came dissonance. They no longer moved in rhythm. Their laughter no longer rolled like distant thunder. It snapped, it cracked. The harmony of the first balance was unravelling. The young gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve, watched in silence. They saw not only what the Jotnar were becoming, but what Ginnungagap might never become. If left in this unrest, there could be no shape, while the formless ruled. There could be no world, while the dreamer thrashed in sleep. And so Odin, with his seeing eyes, spoke first. Not with anger, but with calm certainty. The void must become more than waiting, he said. We cannot drift forever in breath and breathlessness. Vili nodded. Ve placed his hand to the air, and from his fingers trailed golden lines, like the memory of structure, a whisper of symmetry. They turned to their father, Búr, who turned to Búri, who nodded once, a silent blessing, ancient and grave. The tension now had a direction. The young gods stepped forward, not with weapons, not with rage, but with resolve, with reverence. They walked toward Ymir's dreaming form, where frost steamed from his skin, and the giants slept like shadows around his vastness. The decision was made not from hate, but from harmony's need to breathe. To shape a world, they would need to make space for it. To build a sky, they would need to clear the gap. To awaken creation, they would need to end the dream. But that moment was still to come. Now they stood at the edge, not of a cliff, but of becoming. The quiet tension held, drawn tight as the string of a harp, waiting for the note to be struck. And somewhere deep within Ymir, the breath of prophecy stirred. The first god looked down on the first giant, and the void waited once more, not empty, not silent, but listening. Chapter 5. Toward the shape of the world. There comes a moment in all stories, a stillness before the change, when the breath of the world deepens, and even the stars seem to wait. This was that moment. The void had held life, but it had not yet held form, and form to come into being asks a price. Ymir still lay among the mists, vast and dreaming. Around him the Jotnar pulsed like scattered clouds, shifting, multiplying, muttering in sleep. But the balance was gone. The harmony that once hummed beneath the gap had twisted into discord. Odin saw it most clearly, not just with his eyes, but with the part of him that could feel fate stirring, the way a raven feels the weather long before the storm. With Vili and Vi beside him, he approached the ancient being. Ymir did not stir, but the ground beneath him, if it could be called ground, rippled gently, as if reacting to what was about to unfold. The gods said nothing. There were no battle cries, no rage, no cruelty, only quiet reverence, and the knowledge that this was not an ending, but a transformation. Together they struck. In a moment that echoed beyond the bounds of the void, they brought Ymir's dreaming to a close. The ancient giant sighed, a long, slow breath that touched every edge of Ginnungagap and then stilled. The frost giants cried out, some scattering into the shadows of what would later become mountains, some perishing in the soft collapse of that sacred breath. From the great stillness of Ymir's form, the gods began their shaping. They worked not as destroyers, but as artists, as gardeners of cosmos. From Ymir's flesh, they shaped the earth, the valleys, the meadows, the soft folds of hills and fields. From his blood, they created the seas, filling the low places with the memory of flow, with salt and rhythm. His bones became the mountains, great ribs of stone rising into silence. His teeth and shattered fragments formed rocks and cliffs, rough and jagged, scattered like thoughts unspoken. From his hair the forests grew, tangles of green and shadow, soft whispers swaying in ancient memory. And his skull, vast and domed, they lifted above the world, and from it made the sky. At the edges of this new world, they placed 4 dwarves, Nordri, Sudri, Ostri, and Vestri, to hold the corners of the heavens. They scattered sparks into the air, fragments of Muspelheim's fire, and set them in motion. These became stars, their light flickering like soft breath over cold stone. The gods were not done. From Ymir's brain they formed the clouds, drifting across the sky like pieces of forgotten dream, and from his final breath they gave the world wind, a constant whisper, a lullaby that would never end. The earth now had shape, but it was empty of people, quiet in its newly carved bones. So Odin and his brothers walked along the seashore they had formed. There, among the driftwood, they found 2 trees, simple, soft, smooth with salt and thyme. One they named Ask, the other Embla, and from these they created the first people. Odin gave them spirit, breath and life. Vili gave them mind, the ability to choose, to wonder, and Vev gave them senses, sight and sound, warmth and voice. They clothed them in thought and flesh, and placed them in the new world, and so Midgard was born, the realm of humans, wrapped in the great circle of Ymir's remains, surrounded by the seas of his blood, beneath the sky of his skull, held between the fires of Muspelheim and the mists of Niflheim. In the centre of it all, the gods placed the roots of a great tree, Yggdrasil, the world tree, whose branches would one day reach through all the 9 realms, whose roots would drink from deep wells of memory and fate. And in the silence after creation, the gods stood still, not in pride, but in peace, for they had not conquered the void. They had given it voice. They had taken a dream and made it a lullaby. Above them the stars blinked gently. Below them the seas sighed with quiet gratitude, and somewhere in the wind the last breath of Ymir still wandered, not in anger, but in rest. The gap had become a world. The formless had found form. The silence had become story. And so ends the first tale. Not with fire, but with form. Not with chaos, but with care. The world had begun, and the gods, watchers, weavers, wanderers, would carry it forward. But for now, the sea is calm, the sky is steady, and the stars, those quiet witnesses, begin to sing.